What's up, everybody? You're listening to the Built for Anything audio experience. I'm your host, your favorite vegan go-getter, Hertz. And today we're going to talk about the Floyd Mayweather interview that he had with Stephen A. Smith and social media and media in general, and why you need to know the difference between the news and the narrative. Let's get started. So I looked at the interview today with Stephen A. Smith and Floyd Mayweather Jr. For those of you out there who don't know, Floyd Mayweather Jr. has a fight coming up August 26th with Conor McGregor. And, in this interview, they talked to him about the fight, his training. And he said, the usual stuff that we expect. I'm 40 years old. I'm not the same fighter. And listen, side note, as someone who watches boxing, I could tell you that I don't see how Conor McGregor beats Floyd Mayweather Jr. I just don't see it. But it's their job to sell the fight. And he's going to portray it as if, he could potentially lose. And Conor's going to make it seem like he has the best chances in the world. Because remember, Floyd Mayweather is the antagonist. And so everyone wants to see him lose. But that's not why I'm bringing this up. I'm bringing this up because there were a few things he mentioned in that interview that really piqued my interest. And before I get into those two things, I'm going to say to you guys a Malcolm X quote. It goes like this: the media's the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent. And that's power, because they control the minds of the masses. So what does that have to do with this interview? He mentioned in the interview, he talked about the media and how he was able to manipulate this fight because he knew what to post on social media. And Stephen A. Smith asked him about, the media and how they portray him and how he feels he should be portrayed. And he started to talk about a story where there was a kid who has cancer and one of their wishes was to meet him. And so when he met the kid, he just felt so sentimental because he said the kid reminded him of his son when his son was young. And, he wanted to do the right thing for the kid. The kid went to see him train, asked him a lot of questions. And he went to see the kid a second time and took the kid out to GameStop and basically told the kid, buy whatever you want. But he said that when being around the kid really made him realize that how precious life is and how precious your health is. And I always speak about that, when I make videos about being vegan, eating plant-based, watching what you eat. If you know anybody who's suffering from cancer, it's a very debilitating disease. And I've lost people that I cared about to cancer. And I know people who are dealing with other people close to them. And it's not good. And it really doesn't matter how much money you have, because when it comes to your health, everybody's on an even playing field. When you look at Steve Jobs, he passed away from, I believe he had pancreatic cancer. And he had all the money in the world. I mean, this is the CEO of Apple. He bought us the iPhone. But nothing he could do could reverse his health at the time. But Stephen A. Smith asked Floyd Mayweather, he said, that's a side of you that a lot of people don't know. And why don't you talk about that? And basically he said, he doesn't talk about it because he knows that's not what people want to hear. which brings me back to the media. You see, the media's job is to create a narrative. And I remember a couple months ago, looking on Instagram, Denzel Washington was talking to a reporter, and he was saying to them that, hey, it's your job to report the news and to be truthful. And the reality is that news and media, they're after ratings, they're after clicks. And when your motivation is ratings and clicks, then the facts isn't always going to be what you report. You much rather report things that will either create fear or just create people to come back to listen to more. And listen, if the news only reported good things, people wouldn't watch. And what he's saying is that he knows that side of him would never be spoken about often as him doing the bad things. And he understands that by him being the villain, people are going to pay more to see him fail than they would to see him succeed. And if you don't believe that, just look at the fact that he was once Pretty Boy Floyd. Those of you out there who are familiar with boxing know what I mean. When he was Pretty Boy Floyd, just that boxer from Michigan, humble. You look at those interviews, he wasn't flashy at all. And he was just another fighter. It wasn't until he became Money Mayweather that the big fights started to happen. The Oscar De La Hoya fights and so forth. And he understood that character brought more vitriol, but it also brought obviously more money to the table. Because again, people love to watch a train wreck. And the media knows that. And fear is a way to control the masses. It's funny, I was at the gym earlier today and I looked up, I'm running on the treadmill and I see the news is on and obviously there's no sound, but right away I could see that they're talking about Donald Trump, they're talking about North Korea, South Korea, nuclear bombs being tested and how we might have to go to war. And I'm just saying that there's so much that's going on in this world, but they will make this a 24/7 thing. They won't talk about any of the good that goes on. It's to talk about the bad because people will stay glued to that. And, I'm not surprised because I always tell people that until the media and the news is not compensated from views, then you got to expect that the information that they're going to put out is going to be for ratings. Just like your favorite TV show, they're going to do things that's going to make it entertaining so that way they can have an audience and they can have ratings. Same thing with the news. So unless they're independent of needing ratings in order to continue, you got to believe that the information that they're going to put out is going to be based on what is it that they think people want to see, which they've already come to find out that negative news spreads faster than good news. But where does that leave me and you, the audience? Does this mean that we completely just stay oblivious to the news? No. I think being ignorant to the news is even more of a danger than getting bad news. But I think what we have to do is we have to learn to decipher the narrative from the story. And going back to Floyd Mayweather, obviously I know a lot of people don't like him for some of the things that he's done. I'm the type of person where I feel like I don't know a person personally, so I can never be too passionate and say that I hate someone. But I understand that some people are going to look at others and have certain expectations. And when those expectations aren't met, we're quick to criticize. We put a lot of these athletes on a pedestal, and what we got to understand is that they're human beings like me and you. Yes, they have more money, but they got to put on pants one leg at a time. They got to sleep like me and you. They need water like me and you. They go to the bathroom like me and you. So we make it as if they have this higher priority to us when they really don't. We make mistakes. So if you yourself are not 100% a saint, we can't expect the athletes, the entertainers, to be saints as well. Because one thing's for sure, the media is really good at building people up, and they're even better at tearing people down. You look at Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, even to some degree, Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali wasn't praised his entire career. People hated him. It wasn't until he couldn't talk that people started to love him again. And so it just goes to show you that the media can't be trusted to determine what a person's true character is. Unless you're around that person or you know what's in that person's heart, you really just can't base one or two tweets on how a person is completely. You don't know how they are with their family, their friends, their loved ones. So I think there's just to a certain extent, we can disagree with what others do. But to go as far as, they're a terrible person, they're a piece of shit, things like that, it's like, well, look, don't throw stones if you live in a glass house. Before we could worry about how someone else is spending their money, talk about how you spending yours. How much of your money is going towards charity? So but that's the problem that we have. As a society, we have this messiah complex where we look for this one individual to solve all our problems, whether that's a president, an entertainer, a leader in our community, whoever. And the thing is, you can't make people leaders who don't want to be leaders. And at the same time, we can't expect that our leader to embody every single belief that we have. It's just impossible. And the way I could prove it is there's no president in history with 100% approval rating. If that's the case, where have you seen an election where a president got 100% of the votes? No matter who. And I challenge you, go on social media, go on Instagram, look up your favorite person, whoever that is, and scroll through their comments. You're going to find people on there that's going to have negative things to say about that person. Period. Don't matter who it is. So you can't please everybody. And so when I look at that interview and I think about what he said, I think he's dead on to understand early on in his career that, people would much rather see me fail than succeed. And at the end of the day, if I can provide for my family and those around me that I care about and employ people, and I know who I am as an individual, then I don't give a damn what the media says or what me or you or anyone else says. And that's the thing. I think we all should have that kind of mindset, because the media isn't always going to portray people the right way. I'll give you another example that comes to mind. Michael Jordan. Now, he gets ridiculed a lot in certain communities because people feel like he doesn't talk, he's not outspoken, doesn't give a lot of money. And if you Google or really look it up, he's done a lot of charities and he's been giving money for years. It's just that he doesn't get involved in the media and putting it out there because that's not his character. And he understands that. I'll give you an example. There was a time where he gave $2 million, actually recently, I think, to the police department and one of some other charity. And basically, they talked about it for maybe 2 minutes, and then they moved on to the next story. And so people, when they say that, what has he done? I mean, look it up. He's given to schools. But at the same time, why do we need these people to do things for us? Why don't we become our own heroes? Because the problem is that when we put these people on such a pedestal and then they do something that we don't like, then we're quick to bash them. So to me, it's a losing situation. Even when you look at LeBron James, he spends a lot of energy painting this perception of himself. And I just, me personally, I'm like, look, man, you're an athlete. I expect basketball players to be basketball players, actors to be actors, and Congress people to be Congress people. I don't expect any more, any less than that. And what happens is when they try to be more and they're not really informed, they end up flat on their face. And people got to understand that there's PR involved. Now, does this mean that every person who donates is doing it for the wrong reasons? I'm not saying that. But we can't overlook the fact that, listen, good PR goes a long way, especially when you have endorsers. So if you work for corporations like a Nike, you're getting money from places like Nike, Adidas, Reebok, and other corporate organizations. You got to understand that the way you're perceived helps their brand. So when you become a brand, you no longer become a normal individual. You're no longer a normal individual because a normal individual has flaws. A normal individual gets upset. A normal individual has beliefs that might be contrary to other people. But when you're under the spotlight, when you are a representation of another company, you almost have to be perfect. And that's the pressure that they're under. And so you got to ask yourself, do you have a perfect life? Of course not. I'm sure we would want to help everybody in this world, but is it a reality? No. I think for myself, I feel that our responsibilities should be to take care of our communities, take care of the person next to you. If everybody had the mentality of, I want to see who I can help, who's in front of me, the world would be a better place. There's not much that I can do here for somebody in Nebraska, right? But we do have these platforms like a YouTube, podcasts, and the internet in general, where you could reach people from other countries and get your words out there. But if everybody took to their communities and said, you know what, I'm not going to rely on the president. I'm not going to rely on Floyd Mayweather. I'm not going to rely on Michael Jordan or LeBron James to save my community. Because most people who leave the community because they're affluent, they don't come back. So those that are in these communities, urban communities, we got to do our best to make where we're living as comfortable for ourselves. But people tend to overlook that. We spend more time focusing on what's happening in other countries, other cities, other states, and not saying, what can we do in our own community and how can we improve that? Because if everybody had that mentality, then regardless of where you go to, you'd have a similar experience. Because trust me, I know the difference. I've been to different areas. Growing up in Brooklyn, I lived in Canarsie in Brooklyn. And there were certain parts of Brooklyn that you go to and you felt like you were in a totally different world. Bigger houses. You don't see certain corner stores, liquor shops. It was just a totally different community. And it's almost like they tried to stick together. Even here in Dallas, there's a certain area, like it's called White Rock or Lakewood. And as soon as you're driving around there, you see signs of, community patrol. When you go to the lake, you see signs that, this is your lake too. Basically saying, treat this area good. Don't litter, don't ruin it. And people take pride in their communities by not wanting to ruin where they live. It just doesn't make sense. So when you see riots like what happened in Baltimore, it's just unfortunate, because at the end of the day, destroying where you are to send a message to somewhere that you're nowhere near there, is kind of counterproductive. And so, again, when I talk about the media and Malcolm X quote, I mean, he was spot on. He was spot on. You have to know how to separate the narrative. And in order to do that requires you to do your own research. I'll even talk about the OJ case, the famous OJ case. Or better yet, I'll just talk about his parole that happened recently and how much attention it got. Like the world almost stopped to see a parole hearing, which most people knew he would be getting out because he was, in good behavior for the most part in there, model citizen in there. So they knew there was no reason for him to not be up for parole. But it's like the world stopped. The media was just like, it was all over the place. And when I looked at sports and almost every network, everyone went back to the murder trial. And I think about that murder trial, and I remember how it was the only time that they actually cut a playoff game, an NBA playoff game. I think it was the finals. And they cut to the Bronco chase. And he's such a polarizing figure, OJ, because he brings out so much emotions in people. You have people who believe he did it, those that believe he didn't do it, and so forth. But the media was able to paint a picture for you at that time. And it wasn't until you do further research that you're able to come to your own conclusion. And see, that's the tricky thing with today, is that we have to understand that we can't just rely on the information that's in front of us. We have to actually do further research. And people don't like to do further research, because that might mean that you have to explore more than one source. And so we have the biggest source nowadays, which seems to be Twitter, social media. Something will come out on social media, and within hours, it's like it's accurate. It's facts. I mean, it's amazing how it'll spread like wildfire. And so those that are not willing to go the extra mile to research or look at transcripts, you're going to always be manipulated. And that's a shame. But that's the world that we live in. We have to dig deeper to come to our own conclusions. And so I found it interesting that he brought that up in an interview, because I see somewhat of the method to his madness. And he's not the only athlete that's doing that. He's perfected it. But you see other athletes are doing that as well. The problem is is that not everybody can take the scrutiny that comes with being the villain, because it's just, if you don't have a strong mindset, it's what drives people insane. It's what drives people to commit suicide. When you think of Michael Jackson, how much did we just bash him? This is a guy who gave us good music for many years. Got caught up in a situation where, they said that he molested a child. Later found out that it was completely false. But it just messed with his mind because that stuck with him. And so, again, we have our, and then it came full circle because once he passed away, we went back to glorifying him again, King of Pop. And so, again, it just goes to show you that the media has so much power. They have a lot of power, but you can't let them have that power over you. So I'm going to end it here. Thank you guys for listening. And if you like this, please leave your comments. Like I said before, right now I'm going to be putting this on my YouTube channel, which is Built4Anything. And I say the next few episodes, I'll be ready to put it out on iTunes and SoundCloud. But I thank you for listening. And it's your boy Built4Anything. Peace and love. Go out there and be great.